on while talking about, it'll pretty much show. While talking about the state, Paul had shared with me the reversioner or the issue on the surety statement. And so what I did, I added that into the reversioner argument that I did in the book, and I'll share that with you. And this is what I want to make sure that you take this with you on your flash drive. So let's see. But what you have in your hand, I want to update this with you. Now, many of you, anybody that has a pen and paper, keep take notes, because we're going to go over some fundamentals and make sure everybody's kind of up to snuff on what's really going on, because I know that most of you are not necessarily aware of some aspects of the real history. Now, a synopsis real quick, so make sure everybody's on the same page. The real history, part of the vital parts of the real history that's held back from you is the fact that after the Red House fell, that's the Alhambra in 1492. Most of you already know from some of your school studies that 1492 was used as the axis here by scholars around the world, determining the end of what they call the Old World and the beginning of the New World. What it really is the end of the old Moorish Empire and the entry of the Constantinian order under the guise of Christianity, all right? Or what they call the Christian era, where the Europeans began to take power. Now, when the Alhambra fell, the Red House fell, the Popes of Rome set up a global world trust. And that global world trust is where the administration of all peoples and lands that have been conquered under the Spanish Inquisition is administered. And since then, all corporate entities, and particularly of the Western Hemisphere, but all corporate entities are members of the Roman Curia. Write that down because it's important for you to have this in your mind. Roman Curia. I'm going to write that so that you don't have to guess about that. Can you almost work that? Now, keep this in mind. Understand these principles. We're going to make this connection so you can understand how this works. All right? And these are maxims of law. And don't get confused with the idea that that it applies to what people have been calling religion. Because the masses don't get religion, they get dogma. Although a lot of the religious principles are given under dogma, they usually don't tell the people about the anthropomorphic nature on how religion is dispensed for children. And so the adults usually are not taken to the side of science, which they're supposed to get. Do you understand? And so they leave the adults on the anthropomorphic grade too. This is why it creates so much confusion when people start talking religion. And it's not that people that are claiming religion under dogma are wrong. It's just that they don't know the anthropomorphic truth, and they're not told the Gnostic background and the Kabbalistic background. And so what has been happening is that the priests, the adepts, all adepts, you know, the rabbis, the grand chiefs, imams, and master masons have kept the higher secrets for themselves, and that's how they've been ruling the world. And so the priesthood has become corrupt. In other words, they've been having people pretty much take care of them rather than raising the people. And this is the basis of the argument that Yahshua was having with the priesthood at the age of 12. When he was disputing with them doctrine of the law down the temples. That's what that nature is. All right? But keep in mind, because I know all of you heard the term or the phrase, the maxim phrase, moral maxim phrase in Heroditaments, when it says, honor your mothers and your fathers that your days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God is giving thee. And then it follows that every man, woman, and child must confess their own. Well, that converts into civil law as ignorance of the law is no excuse. Meaning that if you don't know the bloodline, or if you're not in the honor of your mothers and fathers, you're not heritable in law. Therefore, hereditaments, or what you call estate, and status are equals in law. And one of the tricks that they have done with our people is that they removed us from the cognomens or the attributes of our forefathers and put their cognomen on our people, which makes whatever our people buy or sell with the mark or the number of their name makes you automatically state wards and not descendable. That's the effect of the brands that the European gave. Most of our people know they did it, but they don't know the legal ramifications. And so they don't feel necessarily threatened by claiming to be Smith, Jones, and Johnson. You know, they know those names aren't theirs, but they don't feel threatened. Right. And that's mainly because most of them don't know law and don't know hereditaments and don't know about the global world trust. Are we clear? Mm-hmm. And so there's an assumption with people that when they're working, when they're buying things, that they own things. When they go out and work hard in their labor, they think it's theirs. They don't know it's hypothecated. Do you understand? They feel the effects of it, but they're trained by their leaders to call it racism when actually even their labor is hypothecated. And many institutions are set up to live off your virtues. And so logically, people who live off your virtues, both Europeans and Asiatics, do not necessarily want this information out. You know, because a lot of their institutions are built on what is called blind faith. Not on faith, blind faith. And they bleed, they're actually parasites. And this is why they usually hide behind Allah and Jesus and Muhammad and Buddha. Meanwhile, they're living wealthy, and the poor pay all the bills thinking that Jesus got a bank account at Chase Manhattan. And this is the game they've been playing for generations. And this is also that basis of that principle of Yahshua, who they renamed Jesus at the Nicene Council. That's why they murdered him, because he was exposing the priesthood. And this is why the priesthood emphasized the devil so much, to keep your mind off of them. You know, and when you study the prophets, Yahshua, you know, Musa, and Prophet Muhammad, all of them were social reformers. They did not pump religion. They were social reformers. And it's actually the religious priesthood that murdered them, in cahoots with the Romans. And that has been a continuous pattern. Now, from their perspective, they pretty much, in their mind and in their intent, have conquered the world. And all the wealth of the world is regulated under the global world trust. So keep that in mind. And all corporate entities are members of the Roman Curia. Keep that in mind. And then you understand why people in power are all Masons, Eastern Stars, Skull and Bones, Knights Templar, Daughters of the American Revolution, etc. It's necessary for them to have some of the Kabbalistic knowledge so that they don't make the mistake of doing any what you call really moral actions to liberate the masses. Do you understand? And most of them, once they find out the truth, they can't talk anyway because they're under threat. However, and this is another reason why when it comes to Noble Drew Ali, and you start talking about Noble Drew Ali, why a lot of people get upset. Because he pulled the wool off of everybody. Do you understand? So they'll try to find fault any kind of way they can, but pay attention to what he said. Don't get caught in personalities. You know, so we're going to give you some history so that you can understand the function of things, because it really is for your liberation. You know, and keep this in mind whenever mentioning Noble Drew Ali. He says, I'm a universal prophet, and my philosophy will be universal. I came to you Moors, my people, because you need me the most. So don't get it twisted. It ain't about belief, it's about the restoration of the estate. And it's about a counter move to the Kabbalist operations and the Khazarian operations of putting the Moorish estate and splitting it up between the Constantinians 1884 in the Berlin Conference under the guise of the Ottoman Empire. And that's the source of their power. And after the Civil War, one of the spiteful things they did was to convert their private corporation debt onto the descendants of the Moors under the tags African American, Negro, Black, Colored, Indian. And once you agree to be any of those things, you lost your birthright. Because to be protected by Constitution and treaty, you must be a party to it. This is why it was necessary for the Europeans to take our people out of their forefathers' names, because international law, treaties and constitutions are identical to family wills. And if you have no honor to your mothers and fathers, you have no heritability. Are we clear? So if you understand that, you understand the politics, and you understand why people get upset when this information comes out. Because remember, the corrupt system only exists because the people believe in it, not because it actually has power. It's actually bleeding off of you. Do you understand? Both psychologically and then thus politically. And this is why they've always paid off so-called black leaders to convince our people to be U.S. citizens under the 14th Amendment, knowing that they didn't know it makes them a corpse. Do you understand? Now, when some people get a little bit of information on this stuff, that's when you see people start trying to get their hands into what they call the bottomless pit account. They're talking about the Global World Trust, whether they're using UCC, site draft, HMOs, authentication of the marriage certificate, authentication of the birth certificate. Every one of those methodologies is an attempt to get their controls in the Global World Trust. Are we clear? Now, the deal of, keep this in mind, all efforts to liberate humanity from the Khazarian order is commended, meaning that we don't condemn any action that anybody does to try to counter Rome, but you need to understand also what you're dealing with. Keep this in mind, in law, there is no subdivisional operations in government anywhere on the planet where original documents are released. No clerk and no agency has the authority to do that. As a matter of fact, if they do, it's a violation of law. So keep this in mind when people are offering you an access to the Global World Trust by some methodology. The only one that has a real lawful claim in law to any estate must be the holder in due course of the original instruments. Are we clear? And so when you see the processes of a lot of these Europeans, you know, even meaning well, trying to get control of their pseudo estates in the Global World Trust, remember, the only holders in due course can be the heirs to the estate upon which the bonds that the United States Corporation Company operatives created the bonds on. And those are Moors, designated as African Americans. And knowing that so much problem has come behind people trying to access the Global World Trust, the Pope himself came out and told the truth. And that's because the Manchurians are putting pressure on them. And so there's a civil war going on in North America. It's on the low key now, but it's going to come out a little bit more in the open. and you know, things are getting ready, like they're getting ready to hit like an apex, where they're not going to be able to hide it too much longer. And you'll know it because what's going to happen, you're going to find out that you have no bank accounts, because they're going to steal your bank accounts. They've already done it, but it's going to become more and more obvious, you know. And they're going to be attacking anybody that's got any dead pledges, to try to satisfy their debts to others, which they've been doing all the time. Of course, it's not going to work, but in the process, a lot of people's lives are going to be destroyed. And so understanding that, we're going over this as a countermeasure to the countermeasure. See, because people need to understand what's going on, not believe what we're saying. Do you understand? And so I'm going over this Dungy case to give you a concept that this is not a new argument, because a lot of people have misrepresented this information and misrepresented Noble Drew Ali, trying to act like he made up that these people are Moors, and that it's a belief system when it's actually about your estate. Always has been about your estate. Anyway, let's go quickly over this Dungy case. Abraham Lincoln defends William Dungy, his nickname was Black Bill, versus the Black Laws, 1855. This is 5 years before Lincoln was the president of the United States Corporation Company in France. You got to keep this in mind. Lincoln being a member of the Bar Association of England, you know, and thus with his transfer to Northwest Amexem, what is Masonically referred to as the North Gate, North America. According to Muslim law or fatwa, a member of the bar could not hold an office in the United States Republic, because the Constitution is derived from Muslim law. And the barristers have always been operating as deputy knights for the popes of Rome under the secret treaty of Verona to overthrow all republic governments, of which the United States Order Union is set up in an allodial principle derived from Muslim law. So there's a countermeasure. Do you understand? And all scholars know this, but most of the people, common people, don't know this because they're not told that. So their concept is that the people who've been operating are the legitimate government. They're really imposters. This is why we've been suffering. They're in the business of robbing you. They're not in the business of governing you or serving your rights. They're in the business of stealing your rights. And this is why generation after generation our people have gotten poorer and poorer. And then they paid off so-called black leaders, you know, to give you this hope alive type thing, while in secret they got a skull and bones kickback agreement. And Lyndon Johnson set a solid ground for that after they murdered after they murdered Kennedy, for trying to counter the COINTELPRO operations the cabal operations of the 1861 and 1871 setup of the U.S. democracy order, which is used to enforce the bonds that was put on the descendants of the Moors since the Civil War. Because that's the basis of their economics. Are we clear? All right. And that's the basis of what everybody keep on trying to get their hand in, whether it's the QSIC number, the red numbers on the back of Social Security number, where they use the dashes and absent of the dashes, credit and debit, etc., and where they're converting their debt to you. So anyway, let's go over this Dungy case so you can get a concept that this is no new argument, and then we'll go on to the reversion argument. Among 10 original Abraham Lincoln documents discovered last summer in the DeWitt County Courthouse at Illinois is a bond for costs in William Dungy versus Joseph Spencer. Written but not signed by Abraham Lincoln, the bond was part of an interesting slander case. Family disputes that degenerated into slanderous name-calling feuds frequently appeared in antebellum Illinois circuit courts. And such cases reflected the intent of American slander law to safeguard an individual's good reputation in the community against petty character assassination. Abraham Lincoln realized the value of reputation and declared in his first printed political speech that every man is said to have his peculiar ambition. I have no other so great as that of being truly esteemed of my fellow men. One unique slander case Abraham Lincoln argued at DeWitt County Circuit Court, Clinton, Illinois, in the May and October 1955 terms involved much more than a defamation of character and suggested that Huck Finn's friend Jim might have recognized his plan to escape to freedom. I reckon that by 4 in the morning, I slipped in just before daylight and swim ashore and take to the woods on the Illinois side. In August of 1851, William Dungy, a dark-skinned young man of Portuguese descent, married a European woman, Joseph Spencer's sister. A family quarrel ensued, which became so bitter that in January 1855, Joseph Spencer, a European, claimed throughout the community that his brother-in-law, Black Bill, was a Negro. Since 1819, Illinois state laws permitted quasi-slavery and restricted the immigration of free blacks into the state, as other northern states passed personal liberty laws granting additional rights to free blacks. Illinois state tightened its stance against them, and 1848, Illinois state constitution required the General Assembly to pass such laws as will effectively prohibit free persons of color from immigrating to and settling in this state. Those prohibitions against human rights were passed as the Black Laws and went into force on February 12, 1853, the same date of the future emancipators, Lincoln's 44th birthday. William Dungy faced losing not only his reputation, but his marriage, his property, and his right to remain in Illinois. Section 10 of the 1853 Black Laws stated that every person who shall have 1/4 Negro blood shall be deemed a mulatto. William Dungy retained Abraham Lincoln to quash the possibility that he might be judged a Negro and therefore suffer the severe penalties under the 1853 Black Laws Act. Abraham Lincoln filed his declaration charging Joseph Spencer with slander on April 17th of 1855 and sought $1,000 in damages. A game of legal chess occurred during the first hearing in May. Joseph Spencer's attorneys Clifton H. Moor and Lawrence Weldon, also Europeans, filed a demurrer to Abraham Lincoln's declaration, asserting that his charges were insufficient in law. Judge David Davis agreed that 2 of Abraham Lincoln's 3 charges were faulty. The case was continued, and Abraham Lincoln was allowed to amend the declaration. At the next term of court, October 1855, the Dungy case was argued before a jury. According to Joseph Spencer's attorney, Lawrence Weldon, Abraham Lincoln's talents as a trial lawyer were evident in his argument for William Dungy. Lawrence Weldon stated that Abraham Lincoln questioned Joseph Spencer's character by demonstrating how Joseph Spencer went from house to house gabbing that William Dungy was a nigger. Attorney Lawrence Weldon emphasized that Abraham Lincoln's tone and pronunciation had a curious touch of ludicrous, which instead of detracting seemed to add to the effect. Abraham Lincoln further undermined Joseph Spencer by using humor to persuade the jury that there was reasonable doubt regarding William Dungy's race. The attorney, Lawrence Weldon, recalled Abraham Lincoln's statement, "My client is not a Negro, my client is not a Negro, though it is a crime to be a Negro, no crime to be born with a black skin, but my client is not a Negro. His skin may not be white as ours, but I say he is not a Negro, though he may be a Moor." Abraham Lincoln. Mr. Lincoln, interrupted Judge Davis, scarcely able to retain a smile. "You mean a Moor, not Moore with an E," talking about the lawyer. "Well, Your Honor, Moore, not Clifton H. Moore," replied Mr. Lincoln with a sweep of his long arm toward the table where Moore and I sat. "I say my client may be a Moor, but he is not a Negro." Abraham Lincoln. Though the account may be apocryphal, attorney Lawrence Weldon's recollection was characteristic of Abraham Lincoln's style. Abraham Lincoln then demolished the defendant's witness's testimony. Attorneys Clifton H. Moore and Lawrence Weldon had secured several depositions from residents in Giles County, Tennessee, the Dungy family home, that was near the Dungy family home. And these witnesses stated that they had personally known the family and that the white community had regarded the Dungies as Negro or of mixed blood. Under cross-examination, Abraham Lincoln argued that the testimony was hearsay, as the witnesses admitted none of them lived within 30 miles of the William Dungy residence. On October 18, 1855, the jury returned a verdict of guilty and granted William Dungy $600 in damages plus court costs of $137.50. Abraham Lincoln charged a $25 fee, which Lawrence Weldon considered minimal. To avoid an appeal to the Illinois State Supreme Court, Abraham Lincoln persuaded William Dungy to remit $400 to the judgment in return for the defendant releasing all errors which may exist in the court record. Under Illinois state law, the defendant could not appeal the verdict, but could appeal only on errors of procedure or evidence. Abraham Lincoln had taught Joseph Spencer an expensive lesson in domestic relations. Now, so I added this so that people who already know law and history won't have to try to explain it to people, because it's hard for people to retain when they don't study. So what I did, I added this in order to help people. So what you have, you can share with others so you can understand the concept. So the reader, researcher, or scholar is advised to review the foregoing synopsis of the William Dungy slander case of 1855 with keen consideration of the realities and fact that one's status also determines one's standing in relationship to one's estate. See, this is the basis on why the black codes were even written, because status and estate are equals. And this is why the European put the brands Negro, black, and color on our people. And once you agree to be them, you lost your estate. So as you can see, you're not dealing with prejudice, you're dealing with theft. Legal theft. Not moral theft, not ethical theft, legal theft. And this is why people who know this will not teach our people that the black codes, when you claim to be black and Negro, that you're actually voluntarily giving up your estate. And so you can understand people who benefit from this is not going to educate you. They just mistreat you, and you be running around marching and praying, not knowing that your status is dead. And you're subject to get all kinds of abuses. You know, so anyway, so thus the spurious tags and brands and nom de guerre, they're called nom de guerre. Names that are not pedigree, or like when somebody gives you a misnomer, that is called in law a nom de guerre. All right? Now, so black and Negro being pejorative and status compromising nom de guerre and misnomers had, can, and will create serious and debilitating social and economic repercussions in relationship to William Dungy's estate. Such a damaged reputation would place all of his present and future hereditaments at risk and subject to escheat. Keep in mind that the European Roman colonial unum sanctum and the doctrine of discovery policies are in effect at and upon the lands and aboriginal natural peoples of North America and the Western Hemisphere. Therefore, one must be aware of the past and thus of the present. Status. These are the definitions from ancient and modern jurisprudence. This is an excerpt from Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition. Status. Status is the standing, the state, or the condition of the person. It relates to the legal relation of the individual to the rest of the community. Status relates to the rights, the duties, the capacities, and the incapacities which determine a person to a given class. It is a legal, personal relationship, not temporary in its nature, nor terminable at the mere will of the parties with which third parties and the state are concerned. And while the term status implies relation, it is not a mere relation. Status also means estate, because status signifies the condition or the circumstances in which one stands in regard to his property. That's fundamental. And so all of our people should know that this is what's happening to them And they're being told by people, Europeans and Asiatics, that you got the wrong color and you got to convince somebody to like your color when it's always been your estate. This is the issue. And so, logically, again, you can understand why they don't teach our people about law, jurisprudence, estate, and status. Why? Because they've been sucking off you for a couple hundred years right now. And this is what's been happening to our people. And then people have been paid to give you the spurious race and color arguments, which makes you incompetent. And when you're incompetent by a law of a state, you're not heritable. See, so it's like a trap. So by the people not knowing what's really going on, they're emotionally going around making color arguments, and they're declared incompetent and don't know they're being declared incompetent. And so even with the estate comes your rights and liberties. So it's corporal and incorporeal. Estate. Estate is the interest which anyone has in lands or in any other subject or property. An estate in lands, tenements, and hereditaments signifies such interest as the tenant has therein. In this sense, estate is constantly used in conveyances in connection with the words right, title, and interest, and is, in a great degree, synonymous with all of them. Hereditaments, all things capable of being inherited, be it corporal or incorporeal. That includes all things real, personal, or mixed, and including not only lands and everything therein, but also heirlooms, and certain furniture which by custom may descend to the heir together with the land. At common law, corporal hereditaments were physical objects comprehended under the term land and were said to lie in livery, while incorporeal hereditaments existed only in contemplation of law and were said to lie in grant and were affiliated with chattel interests. Hereditaments also includes a few rights unconnected with land, but is generally used as the widest expression of real property of all kinds, and is therefore employed in the conveyance after the words lands and tenements to include everything of the nature of realty, which they do not cover. Black. The word black is an adjective and is of Middle English, which you will see ME in the dictionaries. Of Middle English origin. Linguistically and grammatically, Middle English places the word black between the years 1100 to 1500. As a means of measuring the passage of time, this equates to the timelines of the 12th to the 16th centuries. Scholars and other literate people who possess the capacity to read associate the Middle English linguistic timeline by the way of the Julian calendar in the Common Era. In the history of European culture, this period of time is considered the High Middle Ages and is also called the Age of Cistercians. The etymology of the English word black is Middle English, and Middle English is derived from Old English word block. Both of these English words, black and black, are derived from beal, B-H-E-L. The origin and true meaning of the word beal is to shine, to flash, burn, shining white, and various bright colors. Beluga, from Russian beligi, with white. Philorope, from Greek, Philoros, having a white spot. Beal is a suffix variant form of beelou, blue, derived from Old French, bleu, derived from Germanic, bealois, blue. Beal also has various extended Germanic forms such as bleach, derived from Old English blakjan, which means to make white, bleak from Old Norse, bleaker, which means shining and white, and is derived from Germanic blakas, which means shining and white, etc. Important derivatives of beal are blue, bleach, bleak, blaze, blemish, blind, blend, blonde, blank, blanket, blush, black, flagrant, and flame. It is important for the reader, researcher, or scholar to also recognize the social engineering and pejorative non-begear applications of the tags, brands, and misnomer usages of the English words black and negro, etc., as demonstrated in the William Dungy slander case of 1855. The principal argument related to the spurious usages of these words applied as identities and placed upon the Aboriginal and natural peoples, Moors. Such violations constitute arbitrary acts of denationalization, statelessness, wardship tenures, and create a condition of non-descendability, and thus would justify as cheat by the state by operation of law, establishing a lack of heritability. The slander, trespass, and torts initiated by Joseph Spencer against the good standing of William Dungy was meant to injure and to damage his status. Therefore, the lawsuit and declaration in the William Dungy slander case, as filed by Abraham Lincoln, was well grounded in law and necessary as a remedy in law to secure the rights of a state for his client, William Dungy. So I added that because I know that a lot of people don't have access to law or status, and most of our people thought that black meant dark skin. They don't even know it actually means white. And so when people are running around talking about black power, they're really saying white power. And then they're empowering the European thinking he's insulting, he's laughing because he knows they can't read. So I put this up there, and this is also to counter the COINTELPRO operatives amongst us who keep on slandering Moors for exposing this information and trying to make people think that black goes back to ancient Kemet. So as you can see, the word begins in 1100. And this is basic third grade grammatication, but they know our people can't read. And they're counting on our people reacting emotionally and not on the facts. So I put the law up here so that you can understand the William Dungy case, which of 1855. So you can see it's no new argument. So you see the argument that Raleigh set up for the Moors of the Northwest when he set up the old Canaanite temple for the restoration of the estate and the enforcement of the Constitution didn't begin with him. All right? Islam.
Islam. I just want you to, if you would just address our Facebook Live audience, because I was late. They may not know what you're teaching on.
Oh.
Yeah.
All right. Oh, give her a copy of the Dungy case.
We ain't got no more.
No.
This is the William Dungy
You
case.
can address them.
Yes.
Great. Great.
Islam, y'all. This is about the William Dungy case of 1855, and it's a slander case that was litigated in Illinois, in DeWitt County, the Clinton area, actually. And this was 5 years before Abraham Lincoln held the presidential office of the United States Corporation Company in France, which I'll explain. But it's important for our people to know the legal consequence of the brands Negro and Black, which many of our people don't know were brands. They thought they were identities. And it's important for you to know why people who have been benefiting from this dead status, why they keep on insisting that our people call themselves black, because they're actually getting kickbacks to maintain that dead status. And it's important to understand that United States Corporation Company operatives have been living off these people since the Civil War, and they created T-bonds. U.S. T-bonds were first created after 1861, May the 10th, 1861. The Congress for the United States adjourned sine die. That means without day. They adjourned without setting a new day to come again, i.e. they quit their offices. And between 1861, May 10th, and 1871, February the 2nd, they were building a political platform by which the estate of the descendants of the Moors could be administrated. And that is administrated under what is called the Act of Congress, February the 2nd, 1871. That's the beginning of what you know today as the U.S. democracy, distinguished from the United States Republic, which they secretly overthrew. And so when the Congress adjourned sine die, 1861 was actually a coup d'etat. And that was their plot to institutionalize forced servitude that you call slavery today. And they set up U.S. T-bonds, leaned them against the descendants of the Moors, branded them Negro, Black, and colored, etc., registered actually in this area, right here, what they call state of Delaware, and then registered in 55 Gordon Street, New York, and they've been selling them to the world ever since. And that's the basis of their economics. And of course, people who have benefited from this do not want the heirs of the world's largest estate to ever find this information out. That's why they kill people who find this information out. And that's the motive, part of the motive of why they murdered Prophet Noble Ali, and including Il Malik when he found out, and including Khalid when he found out, and including Martin Luther King when he signified, being a 33-degree Mason, that he was going to tell. And so it is going on and on and on and on. So we're giving you some of the history so you can understand it has nothing to do with belief. It has nothing to do with religion. It has everything to do with your estate. And when people try to divert you into a different argument, understand, now you know what's up. And this is why also Prophet Noble Ali reminded the Moors, be careful, Moors, some of your own brothers and sisters wearing turbans and fezes will be trying to put you back into slavery. And then, as you can see in the Divine, those of you who read the Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nations, if y'all don't have it, I suggest that you get it and read it. Because he's telling the Moors to help him in his great missionary work to enforce that Constitution for the United States of America. Why? Because it is a trust instrument. It's actually dealing with your estate, you see. And they subverted that so that they would not have to honor the treaty which protected you. Are we clear? Say it again.
What's the name of that card again?
Divine Constitution and bylaws. Now that's in the Moorish Science Temple. But you want the Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nation. That's a well-known and documented statement that Noble Ali made to the conscious Moors and to all true Americans in the Western Hemisphere to help them in the missionary work to bring his people, us, back into the constitutional fold of government. Because under the black codes, you cannot have protection under international law because there's no such people as property. And this is why so many people have been making the effort to convince our people that it was just an alternative identity for African people and making you confident that you were safe to use it and that you could be U.S. citizens when it was really agreement to be stopped. Do you understand chattel property? Now,
what treaty was that?
say again?
Which treaty?
The Treaty of Peace and Friendship of 1787. Excuse me.
That Treaty of Marquette.
Give me the other mic.
Treaty
Oh, excuse me.
I was wondering if that was the Treaty of Marquette.
Okay, stop it.
Say again.
I was wondering if that was the Treaty of Marquette, Moroccan.
That's included.
Okay.
That's included. Just as an interim. Just as an interim. As an interim. Let me see. Dr. Naila, do we have hot spot here? Let me see. I might be able to get on. I don't know if I can or not.
Yeah, it's up.
Which one? This one? And you should, and you should bring. Now, keep in mind part of this, and meaning that it's not a secret, it's just that our people don't know. Excuse me.
It was Islam that places like Louisa that carried the light of learning through so poetry and places of peaceful contemplation. Throughout history, Islam has demonstrated through words and deeds the possibilities of religious tolerance and racial equality. I also know that Islam has always been a part of America's story. The first nation to recognize my country was Morocco. In signing the Treaty of Tripoli in 1796, our second president, John Adams, wrote, "The United States has in itself no character of enmity against the laws, religion, or tranquility of Muslims."
All right, now he's making mentions of the Treaty of Tripoli. That's in a series of treaties. The Treaty of Peace and Friendship, 1787, the world's longest running treaty. Now, most people here don't know it because they think they're black. So by not knowing they're of Moorish descent, you can tell them the history and it goes over their head because they think that human beings are crayons. And so they're actually outside of the protection of treaty and constitution because they claim to be black when they're actually Moors. So the president's telling you the history. Because, you know, Drew Ali, what he set this thing up 102 years ago, and people are still debating non-debatable issues. So since they won't believe the prophet, remember the prophet said this, the half has not been told. If I told you everything, you would go back to sleep. He said, the half has not been told. And he says, I've laid the foundation for you, now build on it. And he said also, take this information to the hedges and the highways. And anyone's a minister, they're supposed to be taking this stuff to the hedges and the highway. But you already know what happened with J. Edgar Hoover and Calvin Coolidge. And so they created schisms. And so you see a bunch of divisions because that's schism operation. Meanwhile, the people have been suffering because they haven't been given knowledge. And so they're going on with this black thing, not knowing their injuries coming from claiming to be something that they're not. And some of the suffering is not necessary. And people who know what the problem is been sitting around telling them about, you got to be a different color. And that's a code system for property. You know, so the president's trying to tell you, because you won't listen. I'm not saying that you won't listen. The point clearly hasn't been made to the people. And people who know this information have been playing clubbism, even with each other. Do you understand? And instead of looking at the nation, they're looking at the temple as being the nation. The temple is the vehicle where the information was supposed to be dispensed to the nation. Do you understand what I'm saying to you? And so what's happened is they've lost credibility, and then they're mad at the people because the people won't come. But it's nothing wrong with the temple. The temples were perfectly constructed. We have, unfortunately, some corrupt administrators that have not been charged. But you know, don't get mad at them. You do the work. Once you find the truth, teach somebody else. But still support the temples, because the temples, because you've got to have some place to go. You know, but like if I was bringing this information, unfortunately, we have to be in a venue like this because they just allow this information in the temples. Some of them, not all of them. You know. And so the Pope himself is telling you the history. And then, as an example, now Rahm Emanuel, the Jew, who left the Obama administration, I'll show you. The world's trying to tell you because things are collapsing, and if they don't fix this thing, everybody suffers. You know, and so a lot of good Moors in the temples have been blamed for stuff. Then it's really not necessarily their fault, if you understand, because it's the leader's responsibility to make sure this information is out. Go ahead.
For stuff like what?
Speak louder so we can hear you.
Blame for stuff like what? Blame for stuff like what?
People have a misinformation because of some people who have misrepresented the movement or tried to own the birthright. A lot of people blame the Moorish Science Temple. There's nothing wrong with the temples. The temple were properly constructed. There have been some people who have been misrepresenting but have been maintaining power, and they have not been checked. And so people's concepts are wrong. And when they run into people like this, they blame the temple instead of the person.
Right.
It's just like someone operating under color. You know, because the temple, but you know, you're all going to have to go in the temples and clean them up because for the youth to have a place to go. Because there's more than enough work for everybody to do. Now,
Body manual.
Get to the Jew.
yes, all right. Excuse me.
Declaration.
Now, this is Rahm Emanuel. When he left, now, if you all understand, like you see Circle 7? The Circle 7, when you see the Circle 7 on the cover of the Circle 7 Quran, it's actually giving you the Kabbalistic science. Now, we could go into that, but because of time constraint, we won't go into that, but you need to understand what the gates are. When you see the openings like this, and if this blacks out, just hit this a little bit to get it back up. That's the mayor's office right there. This is Rahm Emanuel, but he's telling the history. He's telling the history.
Look on the mayor to the screen.
Say it again.
Look on the mayor to the screen.
Under the screen.
Oh, thank you. Now, this is very important for you to understand culture. Earth culture, are we clear? It's not so good. All right. Now, when you go around the world, and in what you call mystic schools, this is called the Great Circle, or the zodiac circle of the universe. This is also where you get north. I don't know which one of these are. This is out.
Kind of one.
Now, this is a symbol of the universe. I'm going to run through this real quick. When one masters these degrees, you'll see a symbol like this. It's called the Master Seal. That's an understanding of the 12 disciples or the 12 constellations, how it works. It also deals with Yahweh, what you call the 4 elements. What you call Yahweh, Jehovah, etc. is really the 4 elements: earth, air, wind, right, and fire. Well, I'm talking about earth, air, water, and fire. Now, when you master this is symbolizing gold, and then you're crowned with this. Then it's called a nimbus. A nimbus.
United the U.S.
At that time. And this is where, when you see, say, pictures of Yahushua as an example, when you see that crown over his head, with the openings on the side and up here, that's this. That means you've mastered the knowledge. Do you understand? And this is what they mean when they say Jesus has 12 disciples. Do you understand? You got 3 threes in each gate and 4 gates. And so your 3 plus your 4 is 7. That's when you get to 7. Are we clear?
Oh, no.
And that goes in the center. And of course your head goes in the center, and then you have 7 chambers. 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, 2 ears, 1 mouth. So that's chamber of 7. All right, and so that the rising of the head and the activation of the pineal gland, this is where you get the single eye that's used in ancient Yucatan and in Africa. When you see the eye of Horus, the single eye, that means all the senses come together. All the 5 senses plus insight and intuition, and they merge. And then you open up the pineal gland. That's anointing your head with oil. That's what that ritual really means. So I'm just giving you insight. In Germanic language, those who have studied the ancient African culture, this circle is called church. This is where you get church from. You understand? So most people seeing that don't even know what it is. And then the high priest, because they're dirty, will not tell the people the truth. Now, so you take from the abstract realm, and also this is where you get news. North, east, west, south. That's where the wise men follow the stars. Do you understand? So they do an ephemerides. With an ephemerides, they read the energies of the heavens and convert them into mathematical, geometric transliteration into the vibrations of life. Do you understand? And it's also where it says, "For in my Father's mansion there are many houses." And so you have 3 houses in every gate. And of course, this is also where you get your time measure. You see the point? Except you're looking reverse on the heavens, right? Excuse my scribble. And then you have each one of them divided into 3. And this is where when you'll have your cap and gown or in your fez, when you have the perforations in each 4 corners with 3 circles, 3, 9, 12, 18, etc. All right, so that's your 3 houses here. These degrees these are 30 degrees. 30, 30, and of course that's 90. And that's where you get 90 square, 360 degree alpha and omega. And then you put it in a square. Like if someone masters this and they graduate, they put a little kufi on you with a little pin, little point in front, right here, and they duplicate the fez with a tassel, ball of mud called earth, your degrees, and then diagonally they stitch it. If you pull this up, straight up, it becomes a pyramid. Do you understand? And that's 4 square, 360 degrees. So it's the square and the circle. So understand what you're looking at. You're looking at the same thing. You're looking at the culture, but they won't teach you that because they can't control you once you know the truth. This is where Yahshua said, know you the truth will make you free. The priesthood is the ones who've been blocking you from the truth. And they've been sucking you with the Romans. Do you understand? Now, key. All right, so these degrees in here, and each one of these 3 are divided into 10. So you got 10 degrees, 10 degrees, 10 degrees. These degrees individually are called deaconates. This is where you get deacon from the church. The major cardinal points here are called your open gates or your noble points or your days of the sun, the major days of the sun. You would call them in Sanskrit halig, which means sun. This is where you get holidays. Do you understand? Here in the east is Easter. And this is where the popes of Rome, putting the world into darkness, had what is called the Nicene Council, and they were arguing the keeping of the Easter, or they were called the Arian heresy, because they was hiding it from the masses, and they altered the books and been keeping the world asleep ever since. We can go deeper in this, but I'm just going to take you to church for a minute. That's church. All right? Now let's go into Rahm Emanuel. And keep in mind, Rahm Emanuel is a Jew. He left the Obama administration. And I want you to pay attention to the North Gate timing. When the sun stands still, and they call Christmas, right? That's when the sun stands still. That's the winter solstice, the North Gate, right? All right, whole star and all this stuff. Now, pay attention to the date and look at your circle 7. I just want you to look at this date. What is that? December 22nd, 211, right? First full day of the winter solstice. Sun stands still, according to circle 7. So he's a 360-degree Mason. I'm showing you how they show symbols, how they tell you in your face, but if you don't know what you're looking at, it can still go over your head. Well, let's read this real quick. And this is in relationship to people who've been having this information and have not taken this information to the hedges and the highways, who've had this information, and they were charged to take this. So it takes a European Jew to tell you your history, since you wouldn't believe the prophet. And people who had it haven't been doing their job. Proclamation, Rahm Emanuel. Whereas the Moorish Americans are the descendants of the ancient Moabites, Hamathites, and Canaanites who were permitted by the old pharaohs of Kemet to traverse from East Africa and later form themselves kingdoms extending from the northwestern and southwestern shores of Africa, the Atlantic islands, onto the present day continental Americas. So who's the indigenous people?
We are.
Is this India?
No.
You're standing on Morocco. Whereas the indigenous Moorish people of the Americas are now united in order to again link themselves with the families of nations. Seems Noble Ali told you that, but people haven't been promoting it, have they? They've been telling people it was a religion. Only. Not that that's not part of it. Whereas the Moorish Americans being aboriginal, so aboriginal supersedes indigenous. That means first peoples. To the territories of North, Central, and South America. Does that need interpretation?
Nope.
Have formed a sovereign theocratic government guided by the command principles of love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice through virtue of the universal right to self-determination, as well as with the Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People guaranteed in the Charter. And whereas on January 8, 1886, Noble Drew Ali was born in the state of North Carolina, destined to become the first patriarch of his mentally enslaved Moorish American people. In 1912, he was later anointed as Il-Hajj Sharif Abdul Ali by the heads of Egypt and Holy City of Mecca to return to the United States as the last prophet and founding father of the newly risen nation of Moorish Americans. As a result of the 13th Amendment, Moorish people were emancipated from slavery in 1865. Now therefore, I, Rahm Emanuel, Mayor of the City of Chicago, do hereby proclaim January 8th to the 15th, 2012 to be Moorish American Week in Chicago, and urge all residents to recognize the events planned for this time. Dated this 22nd day of December 2011, Rahm Emanuel, Mayor. Does that need interpretation?
No.
All right. Now, hold on. So that there leaves no confusion, and we won't go into other things right now, so that you don't have to. So there's Obama showing you Noble Drew Ali's picture, so you don't have to doubt who the Muslims are that he's talking about, that the American Constitution comes from. Yeah. He's doing what the Grand Sheiks and the Sheikesses and a whole bunch of other so-called leaders have been telling you forever. Yeah. So the president of the corporation is telling you. All right? So does that need interpretation? All right. Now, so let's go back again. Now we're going to go into the reversioner. Now when, hold on. While talking about, it'll pretty much show. While talking about estate, Paul had shared with me the reversioner or the issue on the surety statement. And so what I did, I added that into the reversioner argument that I did in the book, and I'll share that with you. And this is what I want to make sure that you take this with you on your flash drive. So let's see. But what you have in your hand, I want to update this with you. Now, many of you, now when the Alhambra fell, the Red House fell, the Popes of Rome set up a global world trust. And that global world trust is where the administration of all peoples and lands that have been conquered under the Spanish Inquisition is administered. And since then, all corporate entities, and particularly of the Western Hemisphere, but all corporate entities are members of the Roman Curia. Write that down because it's important for you to have this in your mind. Roman Curia. I'm going to write that so that you'll have to guess about that. Can you almost work that? Now, keep this in mind. Understand these principles. We're going to make this connection so you can understand how this works. All right? And these are maxims of anybody that has a pen and paper, keep take notes. Because we're going to go over some fundamentals and make sure everybody's kind of up to snuff on what's really going on. Because I know that most of you are not necessarily aware of some aspects of the real history. Now, a synopsis real quick, so make sure everybody's on the same page. The real history, part of the vital parts of the real history that's held back from you is the fact that after the Red House fell, that's the Alhambra, in 1492, most of you already know from some of your school studies that 1492 was used as the axis here by scholars around the world, determining the end of what they call the Old World and the beginning of the New World. What it really is the end of the old Moorish Empire and the entry of the Constantinian order under the guise of Christianity, all right? Or what they call the Christian era, where the Europeans began to take power. Law. And don't get confused with the idea that that it applies to what people have been calling religion. Because the masses don't get religion, they get dogma. Although a lot of the religious principles are given under dogma, They usually don't tell the people about the anthropomorphic nature on how religion is dispensed for children. And so the adults usually are not taken to the side of science, which they're supposed to get. Do you understand? And so they leave the adults on the anthropomorphic grade too. This is why it creates so much confusion when people start talking religion. And it's not that people that are claiming religion under dogma are wrong. It's just that they don't know the anthropomorphic truth, and they're not told the Gnostic background and the Kabbalistic background. And so what has been happening is that the priests, the adepts, all adepts, you know, the rabbis, the grand chiefs, imams, and master masons have kept the higher secrets for themselves, and that's how they've been ruling the world. And so the priesthood has become corrupt. In other words, they've been having people pretty much take care of them rather than raising the people. And this is the basis of the argument that Yahshua was having with the priesthood at the age of 12. When he was disputing with them doctrine of the law down the temples. That's what that nature is. All right? But keep in mind, because I know all of you heard the term or the phrase, the maxim phrase, moral maxim phrase in Herodidiments, when it says, honor your mothers and your fathers that your days may be longer upon the earth land which the Lord thy God is giving thee. Yes. And then it follows that every man, woman, and child must confess their own. Well, that converts into civil law as ignorance of the law is no excuse, meaning that if you don't know the bloodline, or if you're not in the honor of your mothers and fathers, you're not heritable in law. Therefore, hereditament, or what you call estate, and status are equals in law. And one of the tricks that they have done with our people is that they removed us from the cognomens or the attributes of our forefathers and put their cognomen on our people, which makes whatever our people buy or sell with the mark or the number of their name makes you automatically state wards and not descendable. That's the effect of the brands that the European gave. Most of our people know they did it, but they don't know the legal ramifications. And so they don't feel necessarily threatened by claiming to be Smith, Jones, and Johnson. You know, they know those names aren't theirs, but they don't feel threatened. Right. And that's mainly because most of them don't know law.